Hello, and welcome to our program, Understanding the Humanitarian Crisis in Tigray Province. My name is Barry Zattel, and I'm the chair of the Beth Tzedek Refugee Sponsorship Group. In 1979, the Canadian government created the Private Sponsorship of Refugees program. Ordinary Canadians can raise money to bring a refugee family or individual to Canada. The program has been a tremendous success. Over the years, Canadians have sponsored Vietnamese boat people, Syrians, the Rohingyas, Yazidis, Eritreans, and now Afghanis. The members of Beth Tzedek stepped up to sponsor a Syrian family in 2016. That family, the Alhamwis, became Canadian citizens on January 20th, 2022, and an incredibly exciting moment for us as sponsors and for the family, of course. The kids are all in school, the parents are working, and we are no longer their sponsors. We're now their friends and even family. Our current family is an Eritrean family of 6. They fled Eritrea to Ethiopia. After spending years in a refugee camp in Tigray region, the family made a very dangerous journey to a city where they live in fear that they may be arrested by Eritrean authorities or kidnapped by Ethiopian or Eritrean soldiers and sent back to Eritrea. The women are afraid to go out, and the teenage son was assaulted on the street after being overheard speaking the Tigrayan language. We are hoping that our family will receive permission to travel from the Canadian government during this calendar year. So, how can you help? Please consider joining the Beth Tzedek Refugee Sponsorship Group. You do not have to be a member. We are very welcoming to anybody who has a passion for this kind of work. If you are looking for a fulfilling volunteer opportunity, look no further. Please consider a donation to the Beth Tzedek Refugee Sponsorship Fund. Attend programs like the one today, organized by the clergy, staff, and lay people at Beth Tzedek to learn more about the stories, history, and politics of Ethiopia and Eritrea. Plan to attend the Refugee Shabbat on March 4th and 5th. You can check the Beth Tzedek website for information on that. It will be a wonderful, meaningful opportunity for you to engage with the community in support of refugee sponsorship. Organizations like JIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society in the States, and JIAS, Jewish Immigrant Aid Services here in Canada, were founded by Jews to help Jewish newcomers. We continue to do this work for all newcomers because we are Jews. It is now my pleasure to introduce Beth Tzedek's Senior Rabbi, Rabbi Steve Wernick.
Thanks, Barry. I just want to add on that last comment about why we do this and why it's so important. When you look in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses, the 5 books of the Torah, what you find over and over again is that one of the reasons that God commands the Jewish people to do certain actions, especially those actions that have to do with social justice, is because you were slaves in Egypt. And there's a sense, as we know through the telling of the Passover story, that every year when we sit down to Seder and celebrate Passover, we're supposed to view ourselves as if we ourselves came out of Egypt. And so over the course of millennium, Jews have socialized, enveloped this notion of being other. We've certainly seen it in our own experience as well. We know what it's like to be denied entry and to be denied refuge at times of strife and trouble. And so we react not only to be involved in the rescue of of our own people, which is still going on in Ethiopia, seems to be a center of this right now. The Jewish Agency for Israel is working to bring 3,000 Ethiopian Jews from Ethiopia to Israel over the next 6 months. We talked about that last month. And as Betzedek, we know that not only do we have a responsibility, Kol Yisrael Arvim Zeh B'Zeh, that all of Israel is responsible one for another, but we also have a responsibility, Kol B'nei Adam Arvim Zeh B'Zeh, that all of human beings are responsible one for another. If we want to build a better world for the Jews, we have to build a better world for all people. And that's, relates to that command from the Torah that we have an obligation, a responsibility to be involved in helping the world be better and to use whatever resources and clout we might have in our home countries to be involved in bringing others to safety. And so Betzedek literally means a house of justice. This work is part of the work that we do to create a house of justice and to create a society of justice, not only in the GTA and in Canada, but really around the world. So we're thrilled that we have people in our community that take this work very seriously and that do this work in order to bring human beings to Canada, because ultimately, what are Jewish values if they don't actually impact real people in their real lives to make the world a better place? With that, it's my pleasure to hand the program off to Dawit Demoz, who is our partner in doing this work and in bringing this Eritrean family, which is coincidentally related to him, on top of that, to Canada. We want to thank everyone for being here. We want to thank everyone in JIAS, in Canada, and in Ethiopia who's joining us today in order to extend the message as to why this is so important, how we can help. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rabbi Steve, for the encouragement, for the message of solidarity, and for your prayers. We thank the Betzedek community, especially the Refugee Committee, for organizing this incredibly important and timely event. Hello, everyone. As Rabbi Steve said, my name is Dawit Demoz. I will be moderating this event today. As we will learn in about a few minutes, Ethiopia is at war with itself, and the humanitarian crisis that's taking place in the Tigray region is unimaginable. And so the purpose of this event is to raise awareness about the situation, to get our fellow Canadians to support us in calling our government to use its diplomatic influence to bring peace in Ethiopia, to allow humanitarian access to the region that needs it the most. And so we're very, very grateful for Betzedek for providing this platform today. Just a few housekeeping before we get started. All participants are muted during the period of the presentation. The session is live streamed on Betzedek's social media. So while we encourage participants to keep their cameras open, if you don't feel comfortable doing so, feel free to keep your camera off. If you have any questions, feel free to write them on the chat. We will have a Q&A time at the end of the presentation. Now, without further ado, we will turn to our guest speaker today, Dr. Maereg Adhanom. Dr. Maereg, on you.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very, very much for giving us the opportunity really to speak to you. We acknowledge today is Sunday, and you're here. This is really an honor for us to speak to you about what is really happening in Tigray. Let me project my slide so that, all right, share. I hope you can see something on your screens.
Yes, we can see.
Great, great. As you would listen in a few minutes, the people of Tigray in Ethiopia are being targeted for who they are, I mean, for their identity. And who else can understand what it is like to be targeted for the sake of your identity? So I'll take you through a few slides. I'll take up to 30 minutes. If I finish earlier, that's fine. It will give us more time for question and answer. But I will take that amount of time, probably. I'll give you an introduction. Who are the people of Tigray? And then we will see why has the war started the way it did? And actually, why did it become a war against people? Because normally, when we talk about war, it's between armies. But actually, it is not in this case. So we will see why. And I will focus on the humanitarian situation, but with more on the refugee side, because I know Bethedek works with refugees, and that is close to your heart. So I would like to focus on that. So as you can see in the map, for some of you who may not know where Tigray is, it's found in Ethiopia. It's in Eastern Africa, in Ethiopia, on the northernmost part of Ethiopia, actually, bordering Eritrea. Historically, Eritrea and Ethiopia used to be part of the same country, but during the colonial invasion of Africa, Eritrea was given to the Italians. And after a long time, Eritrea became independent in 1993. But the people of Tigray speak the same language with their relatives in Eritrea. So it's really amazing why you would learn later on that one of the warring parties actually trying to exterminate the Tigrans come from the Eritrean government. So just to show you, this is Ethiopia, Eritrea is here, further north, and Tigray is sandwiched between Eritrea and Ethiopia. The bordering regions of Ethiopia are the Amhara region and the Afar region. And on the western side, you would see Sudan, and that's where the refugees have escaped when the war started. So Ethiopia is divided into 10 regional administrative regions. So Tigray is one. You can see some of them are very big, like the Oromia regional state, the Amhara regional state, the Somali regional state, but Tigray is, as you can see, not so big. So what is Tigray in terms of Ethiopia? What's its place? So you can see it's a core state of Ethiopia. It's one of the foundations of Ethiopia, where the history, the culture, the religion, art, philosophy, all this do come from this part of Ethiopia. Of course, I said Eritrea was also part of this history. So it's the foundation of Ethiopia. And it's one of the 10 regional states within Ethiopia. Its population is between 6 and 7 million. You can imagine the population is equivalent to the people in Denmark, Norway, or Bulgaria, just to give you an idea. Within Ethiopia, we are 6 to 7% of the population. But nonetheless, because it's a core state, it plays a huge role in the economy of Ethiopia and in the politics of Ethiopia. So the Tigrans are, people from ancient history that goes up to 5,000 years, and they speak a Semitic language called Tigrinya. This is the dominant, but there are also other languages. There are 95% of them are followers of Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, and then we have a very visible Jewish religious and cultural connections or influence. The way the churches are built in Tigray and Eritrea are very much similar to the temples. They have the holy areas, they have the Holy of Holies. We even have replicas of the Ark of Covenant. The way the clergy are dressed is also very much influenced by Jewish culture. As I said, the civilization of this area goes up to 5,000 years, but I will be only talking about the Dharma Kingdom, which reigned between 1000 before Common Era up to the 4th century, and the Axumic Kingdom, which is recent, which laid the foundation for Ethiopia. So the Dharma Kingdom was one of the powerful kingdoms, and its reign extends from 1000 before Common Era up to 400. This is around the time of the King David and King Solomon. That's why the history of Queen Sheba and King Solomon's story comes. I'm aware of the fact that the Yemens also claim that Queen Sheba is from theirs, but the answer to that is that the eastern and western side of the Red Sea was governed by the same king and queens, and that could be the reason. The capital of this kingdom was based at Yaha. It's very much close to a town called Adwa, and the only remnants that we have now are a temple that you see here and ruin of a palace. This temple was built around the 6th century. It's still standing. It has a very sophisticated sewage system to accommodate the blood that used to be sacrificed from animals during that time. It was also used by the church during the 7th century after the Common Era. So this kingdom is known to have ruled the whole area of Tigray, including Eritrea and a little bit southwards to Ethiopia. The second kingdom, known kingdom, is the Axumic Kingdom, and it was a very, very strong, and it's known for its control of the Red Sea, including on either side of the Red Sea. Part of Yemen was part of this Axumic Kingdom. It's the gateway of Ethiopian religion and religion to Africa in general. The people of Aksum used to believe in Judaism first, and then converted to Christianity during the 1st century, and Christianity became a state religion in the 4th century, and Islam also came in the 7th century. The first Muslim immigrants came from Saudi Arabia during the time of Muhammad. The Axumic Kingdom had its own coins. It had gold, silver, and bronze coins to the smallest denominations. So you can see it was a trade center that connected the East with the Middle East and with Europe because of the control of the Red Sea. It has obelisks and steles that are still standing, which are registered as heritage, human heritage, UNESCO human heritage since 1980. These are really amazing obelisks built from one rock. And this one, as you can see, is 24 meters long. It was taken by the Italians. They broke it into 3. They took it in 1928, but was returned in 1995. This is still standing since the 2nd century. It's about 23 meters. You can see here a fallen one, which was the tallest and the heaviest. These ones, the small ones, heavy are as heavy as 160 metric tons, but the big one was very, very huge. They're made of granite rocks. And if you know what granite is, it's the hardest rock. And you can see how they have crafted what they want to communicate to us. This obelisk has a gate here, a door, and these are all windows of story buildings. And these were done in between the 2nd century to the 4th century BC. I'm trying to go quick. This is the cathedral in Aksum, built next to the oldest church. We had a church which is as old as 4th century. It was demolished during the war, and this was built just by the side. Okay, to show you also how the clergy are dressed in Aksum, because Aksum is now the best, of the Orthodox Church. And this is a ceremony in one of the holidays. The way they dressed, you can see they have some relations with the way the Levites used to dress during those days. They are singing a song from the book of Psalms, a guy called Yared, Saint Yared, composed the music using these instruments that you see. And the Orthodox Church in Ethiopia, in Tigray and Eritrea still use the same music. This is the town of Aksum today. It has been there for thousands of years. It hasn't grown much, but it's a growing city. Myself, I was born and brought up in this city. Unfortunately, as I will tell you later on, more than 1,000 people were massacred during the war a year ago in 2 days. There was a window of time where I was able to speak to my families. In 16 months, there was a short window of time where telecommunication was open. And I was able to talk to my mother, to my younger brother, his wife, and 4 children live in this town. And they told me how horrific it was during the 2 days where the Eritrean army went into homes, taking out men and killing them. Not only killing them, but they were not even allowed to bury them, and the dead were there for 2 days. Some girls dressed in their traditional dresses and singing songs during one of the holidays. This is just to show you who the people of Tigray are. Okay, fast forward, Aksum or Yaha are no more the capital cities of Tigray now. It's Mekelle. This is the capital city, home to close to 1 million people. It's being continuously bombed by aircrafts and by drones, because the leaders of Tigray still live and work from this city. Okay, now you may wonder, yes, there is war in Ethiopia. Who are the parties and why did they start the war in the first place? And why did it take the shape it had today? So there are 3 major parties on the one side, and there is the Tigray government and the people of Tigray on the other side. So the Ethiopian government, the Eritrean government, and the Amhara regional state, which is a regional state like Tigray, but is colluding now with the Eritrean government and the Ethiopian government to wage war against Tigrayans. The Eritrean government had its own reason. And the reason is they got their independence in 1993 officially. And then they invaded Ethiopia in 1998. It happened that the invaded part was Tigray, because Tigray is the immediate southern border of Eritrea. But the Ethiopian government asked them to go back. They refused, and then there was a final assault in 2000, and the Eritrean government and its armies were defeated. So the president, who is still the president of Eritrea, had grudges against the Tigrayans because the Ethiopian prime minister then was a Tigrayan. So he was waiting. President Isaias was waiting for an opportunity to take revenge against the TPLF, who are the leaders of the Tigray region. The Amhara regional state, the elites of the Amhara are on the sides of the Eritreans in this war, because the Tigrayans waged war in 1970, I think 74, 75, all the way up to 1991, because there was a communist government that oppressed the people of Ethiopia. So there was a movement from Tigray. They removed the government, and for the first time, they institutionalized a federal government, where the federation of the country was based on ethnic identity. So the 10 regional states have their own states. They have their own official language, and they are allowed to promote their history and their culture. You understand why Tigray wants that, because it wants to maintain its heritage, and it wants to make sure that it doesn't lose the history, the years of history it had. So the elites from the Amhara group had this grudge because they dominated the government prior to 1991, and now after the federation, they have to administer only their own region. They can't have upper hand on Ethiopia, because Ethiopia is now a federated government led by different groups. And the Ethiopian prime minister was also part of a federation and a coalition of government that was called EPRDF. There were 4 parties in it, but the Tigrans were leading through Prime Minister Meles, who died in 1912. So they felt that they were dominated, and if the TPLF continues to be strong, they wouldn't have the upper hand in the Ethiopian politics. So all these 3 parties came together to eliminate the TPLF, who is an elected government in Tigray. It started with a political difference, but it came to a state where they said, as long as the TPLF elite and the Tigray political elite leaves, our existence or domination in Ethiopia's politics won't be a reality. So the only way to do that is to silence the TPLF, the ruling party, and its elites, so that they wouldn't voice their opposition to the rules of the Eritrean government and the Ethiopian government. I guess that's in short. So the 3 parties had a strategy, a military strategy, divided into 2. Pre-war strategy from 2018, when Abiy Ahmed came to power, to November the 4th, 2020. And during this time, they deliberately worked to weaken the economy of Tigray by closing major highways, budget reduction by the federal government, termination of major projects that were taking place in Tigray, etc. They also waged a blackmail through government-owned media campaign. This was deliberately done to alienate the Tigrans and the Tigrayan institutions. They also removed Tigrans who were in the federal government executing their duties as federal officials. They continue to deny technologies and finance to the Tigray region, because they knew they were preparing to invade one day. During this time, they were preparing their armies, buying ammunition from outside, and bringing drones that would help them to advance, because they know the people of Tigray are fighters, and they had to prepare for almost 2.5 years. Now, the war started on November 4th, 2020. And the number of soldiers that invaded that small region of Ethiopia amounted between 300,000 to 500,000, which came almost the full military capacity of Eritrea, the full capacity of Ethiopia, the full capacity of the Amhara regional state, and contributions from the different regional states. All this entered on the 4th of November, and they started destroying everything they found on their way. They destroyed livelihoods of people, factories, businesses, vital services, electricity, banking, everything that they can find on their way. They destroyed learning institutions, even universities that were built by the federal government were looted, destroyed. Some of the equipments were taken to Eritrea, others were taken to the Amhara region and other parts of Ethiopia. They even destroyed personal possessions. The crops they find on the way, unharvested, they just burned them. Food from each house was taken. Household items from big to small were looted. Farm tools even were burned, animals killed, what have you. And there is the human rights violation. They killed indiscriminately, from young to pregnant women to priests and religious people, and they did that with a deliberate intention. So here is a MSF, it's an NGO working in Tigray. They reported that health facilities across Ethiopia's Tigray region have been looted, vandalized, and destroyed in a deliberate and widespread attack on healthcare. So 83% of the health institutions, there were hospitals, dozens of hospitals and hundreds of health centers were destroyed. Animal health clinics were deliberately destroyed. This is what is left from the health institutions that were there. You can see these are beds, everything burned, the metal part only remains. You could see even documents, health documents of patients have been vandalized like this. Religious and cultural cleansing was also committed in a planned way. These are very ancient churches. This, for example, was built in the 7th century. It was built on a mountain top, and then they bombed it with heavy artillery. They encircled Tigray, and they disallowed any humanitarian access to them. The media remain closed. There no phone, no internet, no transport into and to and from Tigray. The Tigrans, including myself, haven't communicated to our families for the past 16 months. This is a monastery called Debre Damo. This was built in the 6th century by the Axumic Kingdom. And you can see it's a very isolated place, and you cannot go there except by rope from one side. But the Eritrean army bombed it from distance. It's not about, fighting. It's just attacking an isolated place where only priests and monks are found. Just to summarize what is happening in Tigray: livelihood destruction, gender-based violence as a tool. I'm not saying incidents. I'm saying a planned gang raping of women to deliberately humiliate the Tigrayan elite. Indiscriminate killings. There are more than 260 burial places, mass burial places, that are now recorded, and they will be documented. Destruction of historical, religious, and cultural heritages. As I mentioned, there are a mosque, and the oldest mosque in Africa was bombed, and one of the oldest churches have also been attacked. Ethnic profiling of Tigrayans living outside Tigray. So while they do everything they did to those living in Tigray, they were profiling Tigrayans living in Addis Ababa and other cities, and they were putting them in prison. Some have been released recently because of the international pressure, but there are thousands still in prison in places that are unknown, and they are being manipulated to pay bribes to soldiers. They have become like they are ATM machines, because we have a large number of business people outside Tigray, and so they're being used now to bribe those polices and officials. Businesses have been closed in Addis. An estimated 30,000 businesses have been closed at some point. Some of them have been open, others are still closed. Denying access to basic services until today in electric power. There was a dam that generated electricity, not only to Tigray, but also to other areas in the neighborhood. They deliberately bombed it, and it's not functioning anymore. So the people live in dark. They cannot use electricity to store food or to grind food and have flowers. Nothing of that sort is really happening. So food is used as a weapon. What happened was the Ethiopian government and the invading party had an upper hand until June last year. But the Tigran fighters overtook again the capital city and the majority of Tigray, with the exception of the western part. Then they closed everything and they encircled Tigray. They're trying to make sure that nothing goes in and nothing goes out, so that those who were not killed by bullets would die of hunger. Now, let me quickly go to the humanitarian situation in general. We have 5.2 million people needing humanitarian assistance. 63,000 are refugees in Sudan. We have 2.2 million displaced, and we have 130,000 children under risk. Some of them are young, some of them are still in their mother's womb because there is no food for the mothers. Their physical and mental development is in danger. So the refugees that we have were very productive people, as you would see later, and they fled from this western part of Tigray into Sudan. And this happened in the first 2 to 3 weeks of the war. They ran away for their lives, but later on, refugees are not coming anymore because they deliberately closed the ways to Sudan, because they don't want to allow anyone to get out because that would defy their agenda. But to just show you who these refugees really are, and you can see their educational status here, and you have university degrees, people with university degrees, close to 1,000. With postgraduate degrees, 167. So all people who lived in the West, fearing for their lives, they escaped and they are now in Sudan. And in as much as possible, we are trying to, it's stuck, I think. All right. So, no, is this all? Okay, I think that's it. So if you wanted to know what is really happening in Tigray, if you Google war in Tigray or humanitarian situation in Tigray, you will find evidences of the atrocities that I have been talking about and the situation in the humanitarian situation. You would find children with skeleton, women, very much malnourished. I couldn't bring those pictures here, those photos here, because it won't be ethical for me to show you those. But those kinds of information are out there by journalists and other people who are in Tigray. So you could look at those if you wish in your own time. Now, we have people who need humanitarian assistance. We have people who need basic human needs. We have also refugees. And since your synagogue and the group of people are very much interested in refugees, here are what we plead to you, what we ask you to do if you can. And the first thing is, let's put pressure on the Ethiopian government through the Canadian government. Ethiopia is the largest aid recipient in Africa. So we can ask the Canadian government to apply its diplomatic pressure on the Ethiopian government to allow humanitarian assistance to those in need. We are also trying to ask the Canadian government to give us a quota of refugees, like they did for the Syrians, the Afghans, and others in the past, because we have 63,000 refugees in Sudan, and some quota would help at least to take out the children and the productive people from there, so that they can come and help themselves in Canada. The third point ask is if you can sponsor as many refugees as you can. And we have information about this. And if you need, we're willing to share those as well. And then we have financial and material support as well, in as much as you can. We can't send medical equipments directly now because of the blockade, but very soon we hope this is going to be resolved, and we are going to need a lot of support to rebuild what has been destroyed. So if you want to donate, this is one. We have a Raya community, which has a website. If you go to this website and click, it will take you to where you want to donate. But if you also want a bank account, details of a bank account, it's also here, which I can share later on for those who would be interested. We also have other platforms for donation of materials under the United Tagaru. You can see there are two websites here where you can go and donate as well. That's all. I'm sorry if I have taken too much of your time, but I thought it is necessary that I give you the necessary background if you have to understand really the humanitarian situation in Tigray. Let me stop here. David, back to you if there are questions or the next step. I can unshare if you want, or I can leave the donation, the page.
It's being shared on the chat, so you can unshare, please.
Okay.
If you can.
Okay.
Thank you. So the links has been shared on the chat. Thank you very much, Dr. Maereg, for the very comprehensive presentation. And I apologize, I didn't introduce you properly. Dr. Maereg Adhanom, Ph.D. is an environmentalist with over 27 years of experience in international development. And as you see from the presentation, his experience covers humanitarian response, reconstruction, development, climate change, and research on environmental consequences of armed conflict. So thank you very much for the presentation today.
You're welcome.
And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly share so within this 5 to 7 million population in Tigray, the Tigrayan population, they used to live and continues to live, I'll get into that in a minute, Eritrean refugees, refugees who escaped from the Eritrean government. As Dr. Maereg very briefly talked about, Eritrea is controlled by a very authoritarian dictator who has been ruling the country for over 30 years now, with no means of rights for people. The country is militarized. There is indefinite national conscription, military conscription. Young people are being enslaved and to work in forced labor, including on international mining companies. People work on those companies for free, and the government benefits that, and the government uses those resources to wage war in neighboring countries and to control the entire society. So Eritrea is militarized by between 4 to 6 million people with no rights whatsoever. And people escape in any way they can to wherever they can. And as I said, over 100,000 refugees used to live in Tigray and neighboring other regions. And so as you can see on the screen, over 50,000 refugees used to live in those 4 refugee camps. So the 2 refugee camps, as you can see, Hentzas and Shimelba, are on the northern part of Tigray, bordering the Eritrean border. And the other 2 refugee camps are on the bordering region of Amhara, the Mai Aini and Adharish. So since the war broke out in November 4th, 2020, those 2 refugee camps have been destroyed entirely by the Eritrean and the Ethiopian armies. The refugees who used to live in those refugee camps, many have been kidnapped. As many as 9,000 refugees are reported to be abducted back to Eritrea by the Eritrean authorities and security forces. Many other have dispersed within Tigray and outside Tigray in the rest of Ethiopia. And so people were living in fear, in distress, and many people are now, their whereabouts is not known. And those 2 refugee camps host about 25,000 refugees. And so since the Tigrayan army and the Tigrayan government recovered and took control most of Tigray, those population over 25,000 are in the same situation as the close to 7,000 Tigrans, with no humanitarian aid and no medicine and no support. And so just few quotes from UNHCR officials about the situation in Tigray. And as you can see, this is the UNHCR High Commissioner Filippo Grandi saying credible and corroborated reports of personal attacks, abductions, arrests, violence meted out against Eritrean refugees for their perceived affiliation with one side or the other. So this is very important. It's in red. Many of those refugees escaped from national service, from slavery in Eritrea, and when the Eritreans occupied most of Tigray in December, January, and February until I believe May or June 2021, those refugees were attacked and abducted and killed for accused of being affiliating with the Tigrans for escaping Eritrea to Tigray, quote unquote, the enemy of the Eritrean government. And after the Tigrans took over, many refugees were also accused of collaborating with the Eritreans during the occupation. And so many claim to be also targeted for their affiliation. So being in the middle of between 2 warring parties, you can imagine how difficult that would be. Again, the UNHCR representative in Ethiopia says tens of thousands of refugees fearful for their lives and are currently trapped and unable to move due to the insecurity of the ongoing movement of troops. And so again, those refugees are trapped. There is no access of humanitarian aid to the region. They can't go anywhere. And so trapped there as the entire Tigrayan population is. So again, this is a UNHCR representative talking about, this was in January this year, saying over 20 have already died from lack of medicine and health services. Clinics at the refugee camp has been closed. And so if the situation continues like that, as you can see, many refugees will die. And so, and on February, just last week, in the neighboring Afar region, 5 refugees were reportedly killed and several women kidnapped. And so I spoke with, so the plan was to get somebody explaining their situation or on a recorded video to join us in here, but they were fearful for their life. They could not be seen on a recorded video. that will be publicly shared here. And so they allowed me to use their pseudonyms and to share their stories. So I spoke with 3 refugees. So this family is a family of 6. They have 4 children, aged 4 to 13 years old. They lived at the refugee camp in Tigray for over 12 years. In April 2021, the father left, escaped for his life, and he has been living in Addis Ababa. His wife and her 4 children left behind. And just last month, he was told that his wife died by suicide because she didn't want to see her 4 children dying from hunger and lack of medicine. And so she took her life. Her brother-in-law, his brother-in-law, the brother of the wife who died by suicide, is a diabetic, and he's in a really critical situation because the region ran out, the clinics ran out of medicine. And so he's in a really critical situation. And so here's the quote from Haile again. It's not his real name. There is nothing to eat or drink. People are eating leaves and grass to survive. People with diabetes and other chronic diseases are dying every day from lack of medicine. Again, this is another refugee, Jerusalem. Again, it's not her real name. It's a family of 7. Again, living at the refugee camp for over 9 years. They were owning a small business and living in peace. However, the wife left the refugee camp in July with her 5 children, and the husband left behind to look over the business. And a few weeks later, the husband was arrested by the Tigrayan forces, again, accused of supporting the Eritrean regime. The wife says he's an innocent man, he's working hard to support his family, but now he's in prison for over 6 months and she's worried about himself and his safety. Tedros, this is a refugee who escaped the refugee camp on February this month, just last week. He worked for over 6 days to arrive to a new refugee camp that was opened by UNHCR in the Amhara region. And he said no words to explain what's happening at the refugee camp. And he said he's witnessed people dying from hunger, and he witnessed some people were also killed trying to escape those camps. He said people are selling their clothes to buy food for just to survive every day. And here's the quote that he said: "They are isolated from the outside world and dying in the dark with no food, no medicine, no money, and no safety. Somebody should do something about this because hundreds will die if they don't get humanitarian assistance or get relocated in the coming months." All the refugees that I talked to said they were told by UNHCR this situation is outside their control. It's up to the Ethiopian government and the international community to provide access and to relocate them from that area. And so, as you can see from those stories and from Dr. Maereg's presentation, the situation in Tigray is incredibly dire, and it's not getting the attention it deserves, unfortunately. And so we ask you to do everything you can to bring this issue to the news, to the discussion, to the community, and wherever they can. I will talk a little bit about our campaign, about the letter writing campaigns that, again, with the help of the Bethesda group and us, we've prepared a letter, and we want you to help us to send this letter to your MPs. But let's see if there are questions now. I will. You can raise your hand and also ask questions. So there was a question: where are they walking to? So they leave the refugee camp and they walk to a place where they can get the UNHCR assistance or humanitarian assistance. and that is where the Ethiopian government is the area that's controlled by the Ethiopian federal government, because that's the only area they have access to where they can get humanitarian assistance. Why have the Ethiopians decided to single out Tigrayans for such hate and attack? Dr. Maereg, this question is for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, I think, for the complimentary information regarding the Eritrean refugees. That's part of what is really happening, and they're unfortunately they have to suffer with the people of Tigray. Recently, we were discussing with doctors and surgeons in Mekelle, working at a teaching hospital called IDER, and it was on the news that they were using gloves, washing and reusing gloves because they don't have adequate supply. Medicine has started to arrive at Mekelle, but in drops. The need is so huge, but ICRC was able to transport some medicine after the doctors came out and told the world that they don't even have the basic things like the gauze and hand gloves, and also the medicines that are used normally for chronic illnesses. So the situation there is really unthinkable. In terms of their situation, civil servants, including doctors, surgeons, university professors, have not been paid for the past 9 months because they have been cut off from the Ethiopian system altogether. So they are also humanitarian assistance beneficiaries. You can imagine highly trained surgeons who are teaching at universities, and now they don't have anything to eat, and they are kind of beggars like the rest of the community. Now, to come to the question as to why the Tigrayans have been singled out for hate by Ethiopians, I think it got to do with the media propaganda that was launched against the TPLF, which is the political party who is administering Tigray, and the people of Tigray. Before Abiy came to power, there was a political party, a coalition of political parties made up of 4 groups. One was a Tigray Liberation Front, the other came from the Amhara ethnic group, the other from the Oromo, and the 4th one came from the Southern peoples and nations. So this coalition of parties ruled Ethiopia for the past 27 years. And the dominant party, because of the fact that they were the ones who toppled the communist government in 1991, Abiy, when Abiy came to power, he accused single-handedly TPLF was responsible for all the bad things that happened in Ethiopia. You can go and read in the literature that Ethiopia advanced economically in the past 27 years. For 15 continuous years, Ethiopia was one of the fastest economically growing countries in the world. For 5 years, it was one of the top 3 fastest growing economies after China and India. The progress that Ethiopia made was tremendous. But being an African government, they had some human rights issues. And those violations were committed by the 4 parties who made the coalition party. But when Abiy Ahmed and the 3 others got the upper hand after the popular movement in 2018, all the media outlets, the government, Abiy's government, in collaboration with the Eritrean government, started a media campaign against the TPLF and the people of Tigray. They attributed every evil that was done in the country by the coalition of parties to have been committed by the TPLF. Government media, public media, continuously started calling the Tigrayans weeds, cancer, thieves, all kinds of names that led into genocide, like in the countries of Rwanda or Yugoslavia. So that would be the reason as to why probably the people were made to believe that the TPLF and the people of Tigray are enemies of Ethiopia. That was the way it was narrated.
Thank you, Dr. Maereg. We are running out of time. It's 1:02. There are 2 questions. If you can very briefly in 1 minute, if you can answer them. The first question is, if we can sponsor refugees, can they get out of Tigray, or would we come from refugee camps in Sudan? And the other one is, has the Canadian role in the mining industry in the region had an impact on the humanitarian crisis in Tigray? In less than a minute, if you can, Dr. Maereg. Thank you. You're muted, Dr. Maereg.
Yeah, if you want to sponsor, yes, there are refugees in Sudan. And if you want to sponsor Eritreans who are in Tigray, you cannot access them directly, but only if they are outside Tigray and in the neighboring places. As to the impact of the mining company, yes, the mining company might have influenced the political view of our Canadian government, but they didn't have a huge impact on what is happening on the ground.
Thank you very much. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to very briefly show you a letter that we one teacher, and we will send it in a follow-up email with you. And it's pretty much, excuse me, it outlines everything we have heard today, and asking the Canadian government, I don't know if you can see, I seem to have issues sharing my screen. My apologies. Apologize for that. Could you see the letter, Dr. Maereg, if you can thumbs up?
Yes, we can see it.
Thank you very much. So this is the letter that we organized, again, in collaboration with the organizing committee. It outlines the situation that the Tigrayan population and refugees are facing, and what we're asking the Canadian government to do. Their straightforward asks, in their position, in their influence, they can do. We will send you in a follow-up email with instructions on where to find contact information of your MPs, and with their contact information. So please help us do that. And so with that, I would like to again thank Dr. Maereg for his excellent presentation. Thank you everyone for attending the webinar. If you wish to get involved in any way, if you wish to get involved, Barry provided guidance on how to reach out to the Bethesda committee. If you wish to assist the Tigrayan population and refugees in any way you can, please contact us. And so on behalf of the Bethesda committee, the organizing refugee committee, our presenters, I thank you all for joining us today, and have the rest of the day. Happy family weekend. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your